What happens when Hollywood's most straight-talking actor sits down with daytime television's most controversial host? You're about to witness one of the most explosive television moments ever caught on camera, where things went so sideways that security had to get involved. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me what you think about celebrities walking off interviews. Now let's get into what really happened when Mark Wahlberg stepped into the lion's den. The studio lights blazed down on the familiar set of The View as Mark Wahlberg settled into his chair, adjusting his casual button-down shirt. He had been through hundreds of interviews before, promoting everything from action blockbusters to dramatic roles that showcased his range as an actor. Today was supposed to be a routine appearance to discuss his latest film, a gritty crime drama where he played a reformed criminal trying to make amends with his past. Joy Behar sat across from him, her signature smirk already forming as she shuffled through her note cards. The other co-hosts exchanged glances, sensing the tension that was already beginning to build in the studio. The audience, mostly filled with middle-aged women who were fans of the show, settled into their seats expecting the usual celebrity small talk and movie promotion. "So Mark," Joy began, leaning forward with that predatory gleam in her eyes that longtime viewers knew all too well, "let's talk about this new movie of yours. Another tough guy role where you get to punch people and act all macho. Don't you think Hollywood has enough of that already?" Mark shifted slightly in his seat, maintaining his composure but clearly taken aback by the immediate hostility. "Well, Joy, I think if you actually watched the film, you'd see it's really about redemption and second chances. My character is trying to make things right with the people he hurt in his past." "Oh, please," Joy interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "That's what they all say. It's just another excuse to glorify violence and toxic masculinity. When are you going to do something meaningful with your career, instead of these mindless action flicks?" The other co-hosts shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Whoopi Goldberg cleared her throat, trying to redirect the conversation. "Mark, why don't you tell us about working with the director on this project?" But Joy wasn't done. "No, I want to hear his answer. When are you going to use your platform for something that actually matters? Instead of just making movies where men solve their problems with their fists?" Mark's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his voice steady. "Joy, with respect, I think you're missing the point of the story we're trying to tell. This isn't about glorifying violence. It's about a man who made mistakes and is trying to do better." "That's actually a pretty important message." "Is it though?" Joy leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Or is it just another way for Hollywood to cash in on the same old formula? Big tough guy learns to have feelings, audience eats it up, box office gold. Meanwhile, we have real problems in this country that nobody wants to address." The studio audience was growing restless, some murmuring among themselves as they watched this interview take an unexpectedly combative turn. Mark glanced around the table at the other hosts, hoping one of them might step in, but Joy was clearly running this show. "Look," Mark said, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced as his patience began to wear thin, "I've been fortunate enough to have a career where I can choose projects that mean something to me. This film deals with themes of forgiveness, family, and making amends. If that's not meaningful to you, I don't know what to tell you." Joy's eyes lit up at his slightly defensive tone. She had found her opening and was ready to pounce. "Forgiveness? That's rich, coming from someone with your past. Should we talk about some of the things you did when you were younger? The hate crimes? The violence? Maybe we should ask the victims of your actions how they feel about your redemption story." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to tense up behind their equipment. Mark's face went stone cold, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The other co-hosts looked mortified, knowing that Joy had just crossed a line that should never have been crossed on daytime television. "Excuse me?" Mark's voice was quiet, dangerous. Joy pressed on, apparently oblivious to the warning signs. "I'm just saying, it's interesting how Hollywood allows certain people to reinvent themselves while others get canceled for much less. What makes you so special that you get to just forget about your past and move on?" "I have never forgotten about my past," Mark replied, his voice getting louder. "I've talked openly about my mistakes, I've worked to make amends, and I've spent years trying to be a better person." "What exactly are you trying to accomplish here?" "I'm trying to have an honest conversation about accountability," Joy shot back. something that seems to be in short supply these days, especially among privileged white men in Hollywood. The audience was now visibly uncomfortable, with some people actually getting up to leave. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to figure out how to salvage this disaster of an interview. But Joy was just getting started. "You know what I think?" she continued, her voice rising. "I think this whole reformed bad boy act is just another performance. Just another role you're playing to sell movie tickets and make yourself look good. When are you going to stop hiding behind these characters and actually take responsibility for who you really are?" Mark stood up so fast that his chair nearly toppled over. His face was flushed with anger, and for a moment, the studio held its collective breath, wondering if they were about to witness something that would make television history for all the wrong reasons. "You want to know who I really am?" Mark's voice cut through the studio like a blade, his Boston accent thick with emotion. "I'm someone who made mistakes as a kid, owned up to them, and has spent the last 30 years trying to be better. I'm someone who's built businesses, created jobs, and supported my community. But apparently that doesn't matter to you because you've already made up your mind about who I am." Joy leaned forward, feeding off the tension like a vampire drawing blood. "Oh, so now you're the victim? That's convenient. What about the real victims of your actions? Do they get to just move on too? Or is that privilege reserved for people with movie deals?" Whoopi tried desperately to intervene. "Joy, maybe we should." "No." Joy cut her off without even looking in her direction. "This is exactly the kind of conversation we should be having. This is what real journalism looks like, not the softball questions and celebrity worship that passes for interviews these days." Mark's hands were shaking with rage, but his voice remained controlled, which somehow made it even more intimidating. "Real journalism? Is that what you call this? Ambushing someone who came here in good faith to talk about their work? You're not a journalist, Joy. You're a bully with a platform, and you use it to tear people down because it makes you feel important." The audience was dead silent now, watching this train wreck unfold with horrified fascination. Some people had their phones out, clearly recording what they sensed was going to be a viral moment. The other co-hosts sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out to its inevitable conclusion. Joy's face flushed red with anger. "How dare you call me a bully? I'm holding you accountable for your past, something that apparently nobody else has the backbone to do. You waltz in here expecting us to just fawn over your latest movie while ignoring the elephant in the room." "The elephant in the room?" Mark laughed bitterly. "The elephant in the room is that you're so desperate for ratings and attention that you'll destroy someone's reputation on live television just to get people talking. You don't care about accountability or justice or any of the things you claim to stand for. You care about yourself and your own ego. That's rich coming from someone who built their entire career on playing tough guys because they can't escape their own violent past." Joy snapped back. "Tell me, Mark, when you're on set pretending to be some hero, do you ever think about the people you hurt? Or is it easier to just pretend that was someone else?" The studio gasped collectively. Even the camera operators seemed to recoil at the viciousness of her words. Mark's face went completely white, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually lose control entirely. "You know what?" Mark said quietly, his voice so low that the microphones barely picked it up. "You're right about one thing. I did hurt people when I was young, and I've spent every day since then trying to make up for it. But you, Joy, you hurt people right now, today, on live television. And you act like you're doing the world a service. Don't you dare turn this around on me." Joy shot back, her voice rising to near shriek levels. "I'm not the one with a criminal record. I'm not the one who committed hate crimes. I'm not the one pretending to be something I'm not. No, you're just someone who attacks people for entertainment," Mark replied, his composure returning as his anger crystallized into cold fury. "You sit behind this desk and you judge everyone else while contributing nothing positive to the world. At least when I made mistakes, I was a kid who didn't know better. You're a grown woman who should know exactly what you're doing." The other hosts were now actively trying to signal to the producers to cut to commercial, but the cameras kept rolling. This was reality television at its most raw and unfiltered, and everyone in the studio knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Joy stood up now too, matching Mark's aggressive posture. You want to talk about contributing something positive? What have you contributed besides mindless entertainment and violence? At least I use my platform to speak truth to power and hold people accountable for their actions. Truth to power? Mark's voice was incredulous. You're attacking a guest on your own show. Someone who came here to talk about their work and instead got ambushed by your personal agenda. If this is your idea of speaking truth to power, then you're even more delusional than I thought. Personal agenda? Joy's voice cracked with fury. My personal agenda is making sure that people like you don't get to just waltz through life without consequences. You think because you're rich and famous that your past doesn't matter anymore, but some of us remember. Some of us care about justice. Justice? Mark shook his head in disgust. This isn't justice, Joy. This is a public execution disguised as an interview. You're not interested in accountability or growth or any of the things you claim to care about. You're interested in destroying people because it makes for good television. The tension in the studio was now so thick you could cut it with a knife. Security guards had quietly positioned themselves near the set, clearly anticipating that this situation was about to spiral completely out of control. The audience was transfixed, unable to look away from this spectacular collision of personalities. You know what your problem is, Mark? Joy's voice was now pure venom. You think you can just show up here with your fake humility and your rehearsed redemption story, and we'll all just nod along like good little sheep. But some of us aren't buying what you're selling. Some of us know exactly who you really are, underneath all that Hollywood polish. Mark took a step closer to Joy's desk, his face a mask of controlled rage. And you know what your problem is, Joy? You think you're some kind of moral authority when really you're just a bitter, angry person who tears others down to make yourself feel better. You hide behind this show and pretend you're fighting for justice, but really, you're just a schoolyard bully who never grew up. The confrontation had reached a boiling point, with both participants now standing face to face across the desk, their voices echoing through the stunned studio. The other co-hosts had given up trying to mediate, and were simply watching in horror as their show descended into complete chaos. The studio lights seemed to burn brighter, as Mark and Joy stared each other down across the desk, their mutual contempt filling every corner of the room. The audience sat in stunned silence, phones recording what they instinctively knew would become one of the most talked-about television moments in recent memory. A schoolyard bully who never grew up? Joy's voice was shaking with rage. That's rich coming from Boston's former street thug. Tell me, Mark, do you still get that same rush from intimidating people, or do you save it all for the movie cameras now? Mark's eyes narrowed to slits. You really want to go there, Joy? You want to talk about intimidation? Look around this studio. Look at your co-hosts. Look at your audience. Everyone here is terrified of you because you've built your entire career on humiliating people who can't fight back. The only difference between you and a schoolyard bully is that you get paid millions to do it. I get paid to ask the tough questions that nobody else will ask. Joy fired back, her finger now pointing directly at Mark's chest. I get paid to hold people like you accountable when the rest of the media just rolls over and plays dead. If that makes me a bully in your eyes, then so be it. Tough questions? Mark's laugh was harsh and bitter. These aren't tough questions, Joy. This is character assassination. You dragged up things from 30 years ago not because you care about justice, but because you knew it would get a reaction. You're not a journalist. You're a shock jock with delusions of grandeur. Whoopi made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Maybe we should take a break and... No, Joy snapped without taking her eyes off Mark. We're going to finish this conversation right here, right now. I want everyone watching to see what happens when someone finally stands up to Hollywood's golden boy and doesn't back down. Fine by me, Mark said, his voice deadly calm. But when this is over, I want everyone to remember that you're the one who chose to turn a simple interview into a personal attack. You're the one who decided that destroying someone on live television was more important than basic human decency. Joy's face was now bright red with fury, her carefully applied makeup beginning to run slightly from the studio heat and her own perspiration. Human decency? That's what you're going with? Someone who committed hate crimes as a teenager is going to lecture me about human decency? Yes, I am, Mark replied firmly. Because unlike you, I learned from my mistakes. I grew as a person. I made amends. You, on the other hand, seem determined to stay exactly as cruel and vindictive as you were the day you started this show. The other co-hosts were now actively trying to signal to the producers to end this segment, but the cameras kept rolling. The control room was in complete chaos, with executives screaming conflicting orders while ratings monitors showed viewership numbers climbing to unprecedented levels. Cruel and vindictive. Joy's voice reached a new pitch. I'll tell you what's cruel and vindictive. It's a system that allows people like you to buy your way out of consequences while your victims have to live with the trauma forever. It's a Hollywood machine that rewards violence and calls it redemption. And I'll tell you what's cruel and vindictive, Mark shot back. It's using your platform to attack someone who came here in good faith. It's pretending that your personal vendetta is somehow noble. It's destroying people for entertainment and calling it journalism. Joy slammed her hand down on the desk so hard that her coffee mug jumped and spilled across her notes. This isn't entertainment. This is accountability. This is what real consequences look like when you can't hide behind your publicist and your carefully crafted image. Real consequences? Mark's voice was incredulous. The only consequence here is that you've shown everyone watching exactly what kind of person you really are. You've revealed yourself to be exactly the kind of bully that you claim to be fighting against. The tension had reached a breaking point. Security guards were now positioned at the edges of the set, ready to intervene if this verbal warfare turned physical. The audience was completely transfixed, some people actually holding their breath as they watched this spectacular collision of egos unfold in real time. You know what, Joy? Mark said suddenly, his voice dropping to a conversational level that was somehow more menacing than his previous shouting. I came here today to talk about a movie that deals with redemption, forgiveness, and second chances, themes that apparently you know nothing about. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. He turned slightly toward the cameras, addressing the audience directly for the first time. Everyone watching this needs to ask themselves a simple question. Who would you rather be? Someone who made mistakes as a kid but spent their entire adult life trying to be better? Or someone who uses their power and platform to tear other people down just because they can? Joy's mouth fell open, realizing that Mark had just turned the entire confrontation on its head with a single devastating observation. You don't get to. But Mark was already moving. He reached up and unclipped his microphone with deliberate precision, the small device hitting the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent studio. This interview is over. You can't just walk away from this, Joy called after him, her voice now tinged with panic as she realized she was losing control of the situation entirely. You can't run away every time someone challenges you. Mark paused at the edge of the set and turned back one final time. His voice was calm, controlled, and absolutely final. I'm not running away from anything, Joy. I'm walking away from you. There's a difference. With that, he strode off the set with the confidence of a man who knew he had just won the most important battle of words in his entire career. The studio remained frozen in shocked silence for several long seconds before chaos erupted. Producers rushed onto the set, the other co-hosts sat in stunned disbelief, and Joy remained standing behind her desk, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water as she realized what had just happened. The cameras finally cut to commercial, but it was too late. The damage was done, the moment was captured, and within minutes, clips of the confrontation would be spreading across social media faster than wildfire. Mark Wahlberg had just delivered one of the most devastating verbal takedowns in television history, and he had done it with the kind of controlled precision that only comes from someone who has truly learned to channel their anger into something productive. Joy slumped back into her chair, finally understanding that she had pushed too far and lost everything in the process. The hunter had become the hunted, and the entire world had watched it happen live. That's the story of what happens when daytime television's biggest bully finally met someone who refused to be intimidated. What did you think about Mark's decision to walk off? Do you think he handled it the right way, or should he have stayed and continued fighting? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.